Can you describe the circumstances surrounding your arrival at RMC in 1959 or 1959?
Yes, 59. I must go back a step. When I was dispatched to RMC by the Strathconas, I was given the information that I was going there to share my wartime experiences with the cadets and maybe do a little bit of coaching.
Right.
However, when I arrived to a tumultuous reception by Commandant Pears, I was wondering if he made a mistake.
What do you mean by tumultuous?
But he was so gracious and treated me as an equal, and he said, but I have to interrupt here and tell you that you have to go to an assignment, a sports meeting at Queen's. I said, where's Queen's? And he said, it's lunchtime, grab yourself some lunch and I'll have a... He said, I know just the fellow that you need. Whether you can get him or not, I don't know. I said, what's his name? He said, Doug Hargreaves. I said, you know where he's at? He's at the Sioux. And he's studying under Tom Titman, and he's teaching at the high school level. So I called him and I said, by any chance would you be interested in coming to RMC and handling the football program? He said, I would love it. I said, well, I'll do the best I can to get a civilian appointment. They were cutting down on the forces at that time, and there was no chance whatsoever. So not to be denied, I went back to him and I said, I can't get a civilian position, but would you join the forces? He said, yes, I would. Yes, I would. He had gone through ROTP at Queen's. He became, with the Air Force, he became a pilot. And so, but that wasn't what he wanted to do, and he wanted to get into the phys ed field. So he came to the recruiting office, and they immediately sent him to renew his green ticket or whatever ticket it is, and they made him captain of a freight crew. And he was just devastated, and he said, Danny, I'm in a bind here. I don't want to do this job. Well, I said, why don't you write a letter to your boss saying you came in for this purpose, and if that's not going to be accommodated, I'd like to resign. It got the desired results. They sent him to RMC. In the first game against Queens, we lost. I said to the football team, are you interested in playing with the men? He said, yes. So I said, okay. So we arranged it. We got plastered 55-0. I went in the dressing room and I said, anybody hurt? Want to do it again? Yes. 35-7 the next time. The third time, with Hargreaves in the chair, we were winning 12-6. With the last play of the game, and Cal Connors, who had been at Queen's for 7 years and at Rhodes for 2 years, was still throwing the football. And he threw a Hail Mary, and Jimmy Young from Football Hall of Fame fell into the end zone, and they beat us 13-12. So, but The one that I like best is, as you both know, Cadet weekend was built around the football game.
Yeah.
Ever since the beginning, and my last one was we were hosting McGill, and don't we beat McGill in that particular game? So, and Hargreaves in his second year was number 2 in the nation in defense.
Yeah.
And he was reaching the stage where we were nipping at the heels of all of them.
Yeah.
Because the kids were capable. They just didn't, most of them hadn't played before, didn't understand the game. And one of the good features that the chiefs of staff authorized, I could send any member of the staff to any course anywhere. And just a case in point, the first time I sent Hargreaves to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers training camp, the next time to the Argonauts, the next time to the New York Giants, and the last time to the Dallas Cowboys. So he was on top of the situation. To make a long story short, they promoted him and took him away from the college. He was unhappy, got out and became the athletic director at Dalhousie. Didn't like that. And I heard rumors that Garney Henley had turned down the job at Queen's. And I called Doug and said, yes, and I got a hold of Queen's. And the rest is history. He won 3 national championships.
Yeah. Program I think that you introduced was some way of measuring the physical fitness of the cadets. Now I know from my time that was never done.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yes, I would.
Background there?
The person who had, this was his field, kinesiology and so on, and that was Hank Tedachuk. So he did tests and measurements on the cadets. And it was just as clear as the first year they were boys. The second year they were young, starting to get a little cocky youth. The third year they were young men, and the fourth year, with their experience of running the wing, they were ready to take on an assignment in their specific service. So Hank Tedachuk gave the first paper on tests and measurements at the Montreal Symposium. That's the first ever done by the armed forces. So that we were on top of this situation, measuring the PF standards, and this is where the cadets clearly understood there are the standards that you have to meet if you're going to be commissioned out of this college.
Now, when you first did it, was the level good or was it surprisingly bad?
Not surprisingly bad, because if you take the recruits, it was running the square and so on, yes. And there's not a better conditioner. So they were in pretty good shape. The second year, because they had made the year, we're now in second year and we've got the recruits behind us, they took on a position of responsibility. And as you well know, in those days, the second year would design the assault course, and then they got a little carried away with it, so they gave that responsibility to our department until well along the way, and they finally said, the wing said, we'd like to run this thing. And we were very skeptical. It was very tough. and a cadet was drowned during the assault course, the obstacle course, and so it came back to the our staff to supervise. And I don't want to diminish the wing for a second. That's when the fourth year was really running the cadets, and they always surprised you with their skill, thinking, and accomplishments, and training those below them. The only time that we had a problem, I feel, was when the veterans, like myself, started leaving the scene. They were bringing back ex-cadets. But the problem is they were bringing back ex-cadets who were only out 1 year. And so they were now dealing with people that they'd played games with, and it was a bad move. And then they changed it and got the older, more experienced people in. And the reason I had a good handle on this is when you take a look at the staff, the staff itself, from Red Sawyer, Stanley, Preston, Hutch, and on it goes. These were tall timbers, but they were also augmented with ex-cadets who went on and got their engineering degrees and so on, and were now brought back on the academic staff. One that comes to mind, because him and I hit it off from day one, and we continue to do so to this day, is Jack Pike. Mm-hmm. And there's no more devoted ex-cadet in this world than Jack Pike. We have watched over the 50 years now that I've been there with on the fringes, we've watched the college go from no degree to arts degree to arts and science degree to engineering to postgraduate, and then to become the University of the Canadian Armed Forces. So that they could do it by correspondence, in some cases come here on the grounds, and in case of postgraduate work, they pretty near had to come here. And it has been just a solid performance. And I'm not an ex-cadet, so I'm not gilding the lily. I would say this, with my experience as the executive director of the Canadian Intercollegiate Athletic Union, and it's 43 members, and having visited them all, I can say without equivocation that this is the finest university in Canada, most demanding, and also the best military academy maybe in the world. And I can say this on having gone through Woolwich and Sandhurst and at St. Cyr and Annapolis and West Point, Colorado, and comparing, and this, to my mind, has no peer.
Can I get you back to facilities? Because
Yes.
we were on that earlier, and I interrupted you to go in another direction. But when you arrived...
This was a miracle. Here is the program, and at 4 o'clock, RMC didn't have the facilities, But CFB Kingston had swimming pools and gymnasiums, so we made use of it. Queens, of all places, weren't using all their facilities, and we got permission there. We went to the high schools because at 4 o'clock they're gone and the facilities are available. And so it was a regular lineup of trucks and buses to take the cadets to these various places. Well, we had been pushing common, and now along comes General Spencer, an engineer, looks the part of a soldier, has that ability to lead and have you follow. And so he said to him, now look, this is the worst college in Canada in terms of facilities. And we're long overdue for a station development program. He said, you're right. He said, I'm going to write a letter to all departments. I want them to sit down and study thoroughly, projecting 30 years down the road, and an enrollment number of 750 cadets. Tell me what you need in the case of plant in order to do your job. After 6 weeks, he brought in Adamson Consultants out of Toronto. They did an artist sketch of the college with all these projects, and after a little titivation here and there, they bought the idea. PMC was brought in from Ottawa along with General Dextras and looked at the program and supported it all but the sports program. And now I'm fit to be tied. So I said, well, you know, it's now or never, McLeod. You take your lumps, or maybe you can turn the tide. So I said, sure. I can remember, I said, of all the generals I can think of, you're the last one that I could see turning this program down. I can recall supporting you in a little operation called Wardy, when you were just livid. You had no troop leaders that could lead.
Is this Dextras we're talking about?
Dextras.
Now? Okay.
He looks at me, give me that. I know he wasn't reading it, but he went through the, signed it. And so one of the first things we did, I don't know who it was, but someone from Ottawa government ordered a rink built, the Constantine Rink. This was sort of theirs, showing that they were interested in helping the program at RMC. The next one was filling in the bay. Where the career hour gates are today, that was bay. And those lower fields, and now they're the envy of all universities, just beautifully kept playing fields. We got the engineers to deal with all the construction companies where you have clean fill, here's the spot. And it was amazing how fast that was filled in. And then, of course, they had to topsoil it and so on. That was the second one. We wanted 2 track and field, authentic. And they were landscaped and put in, and we wanted them not only for our own use, But for community competitions, provincial competitions, national competitions, and even the Commonwealth Games. And one of the people really responsible for this taking off was the Phys Ed officer, Rolf Lund. He became the head of track and field. He was seconded for the Commonwealth Games to run it. He became the president of the track and field national, and became the Canadian representative to the Olympics. So there's something that paid off, and we got great use out of it. Some of our athletes went on to compete at the national level and at the Commonwealth, or the Commonwealth Games, and even had 2 or 3 in the compete in the Olympics.
We didn't have a hockey rink. What did the 2 college hockey teams have to do?
This is what happened. There were only 2 rinks at that time, only 2 in Kingston. One was the Jock Hardy, and the other one was the Community Center, Memorial Center. Well, you can imagine the whole of the community demands were on there, and Queens had first call on theirs, the Jock Hardy. So it meant us renting space because where the library is, it was just totally unsatisfactory. It would thaw, and never at any time was it really a good service or ice service. So it meant that we were taking the cadets out at all hours at night or in the morning before others, and this did not sit well with the college or the cadets. So as soon as the rink was fit to play in, it was a godsend, because the letter is very clear that the Constantine rink was built for the college, and they had priority, and any time that was left over went to the base, and if there was still time left over, the community could be accommodated. So that was the problems that we had with the program. But as soon as those started to get ironed out, not because I say so, but a foremost sports journalist, Andy O'Brien. I don't know what prompted him to come to the college in the first place, and he did a story, center page in Weekend Magazine, singing the praises of the program. He came back in '63, done the same thing, and back again in '65, and exclaimed to Canada that this was the greatest program that exists in Canada. And this was because we had so many great people and a team, and even people from across the causeway, civilians, helping with basketball and with golf and with curling and with tennis, so that that integration with the community was a good feature as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So now, because of the attitude of the cadets and their accomplishments, for example, at one stage, We were first or second in 13 out of 22 varsity sports. And Andy O'Brien wrote that up in his column. A lot of that had to do with outstanding coaching. For example, our boxing team. And they didn't want to introduce boxing. And I said, I don't understand this, because I've never asked a pre-war ex-cadet what his greatest memory was of the college. Every single one of them would say, recruit boxing. Now, we have 2 national champions, and my instructions were, because I boxed all my life and helped out as much as I could, I said, all we're interested is teaching these cadets self-defense. When it reaches a stage where one cadet is superior to the other, stop the bout. We're not here to see people get beaten up, but we are concerned about people leading troops and having his first cold fish across the face in front of troops and not know how to handle himself. And I think the last year I was there, we were never less than second in boxing at the varsity level. It was just amazing. The cadets in the armed forces, every conflict that every conflict that Canada, I'm not saying before Canada, but when Canada became Canada, RMC ex-cadets led the way in all those conflicts.
Yep.
When they weren't doing it in the Army, they were doing it in the private sector. Didn't matter whether it was politics, whether it was ambassadors, whether it was consultants, whether it was financiers. They dominated the scene, and they were the proof of the pudding. So that, and when they couldn't find enough challenges on the ground, you can see them up in the space program.
Yeah.
So if you take a normal university, it has a 3.5-year course which they complete in 4 years. RMC has a 6.5-year course squeezed into 4 and 5 years. And that difference is you can produce officers, 90-day wonders and so on, and they can be very useful, and maybe one or the odd one might go right up the ladder. But they do not have the capacity to handle the big scene when you're in a war where administration is to battle as 80 to 20, and you have the leadership required for both sides, administration and battle. And the college has done that. World War I, and certainly World War II. If you take a look at World War II, if you start the defense minister, ex-cadet, the Army commander, ex-cadet, the Corps commanders, ex-cadets, 3 of the 5 divisional commanders, ex-cadets. Brigade commanders, almost all were ex-cadets. My commanding officer, ex-cadet. Squadron leader, an ex-cadet, and a troop leader that's soldiers alongside me, ex-cadet. So they are just woven into the fabric of this country, and and you take, if they felt that they weren't in their niche and they wanted to get into another field, they became doctors. We have a bishop in the Anglican Church, and there's several others, Chris Carr, Bill Ferguson, clergymen. There is no facet of the private sector that you want to mention that I can't name you a top dog ex-cadet.
Can you talk a little bit about the, I think it was the CIAU, the formation of it? Now,
Yeah.
RMC obviously was a part
Yeah.
of that as well.
Yeah.
How did that occur?
Well, what happened is it took a little time, and wrote to all the small colleges and said, now look, I think it's time for us to form a national body, because we've had these groups from the west to the east, from the east to the center, but never a national organization. And I got a hold of Walter Byers, who was the president of the NCAA in the United States, and they'd only been going for 77 years before us. And I asked him, what do you think the best way to? So he said, if I were you, I would call a meeting and say, this is not for any debate. This is an information meeting. We want you to take that information back to your presidents, monsignors, whatever, and have a thorough debate on it. And I call that one for University of Toronto. The second one we called for McGill. Now is the time where we expected some action, and the debate goes on for truth. And I finally got a little tired, and we've got to force this one way or the other. I said, I thought the armed forces was a bit bad at procrastinating, but you've got them skinned 4 ways from Friday. So I'm going to make the motion now that we form the Canadian Intercollegiate Athletic Union with or without McGill, Queen's, Toronto, and Western. And Dean Matthews from UBC jumps up, I second the motion. And so Harry Griffiths, who's the athletic director at McGill, he popped up and said, can we not leave out the without McGill Creed? I said, you're free to make an amendment, which he did. And I said, we're not going to debate this issue. I'm calling for the question. If you're in favor of the motion, let's see your hand. Unanimous. And so that was the start of it. Now once you've got
What an achievement.
once you've got that, you're just at the beginning. We had to present this to what was existing at that time as the Learned Society in Ottawa, and a Dr. Andrews. So I contacted him, and he said, well, now, we'd be delighted to hear your presentation, but I think for you to get to first base, you better have a couple of presidents of universities. So I got a hold of Corey at Queen's, and he said he'd be delighted. Got a hold of Claude Bissell at Toronto, and he being a 4th Armored Division fellow, he was prepared to help. So we went to Ottawa, and they came back and said, absolutely. So then it meant drafting up a constitution, and there was a fellow from Western, Danny McLeod, a lawyer, myself, and Dr. Bob Jones here at RMC. The four of us produced the Constitution for the CIAU. And now, once you get to that stage, the next thing is, when are we going to have those national competitions? I went to the CBC, and I think his name was Johnson. He was the president at that time. And told him what my problem is, and I said, we want to hold first championships, national championships, and we need seed money. Well, he said, how's a check for $10,000? So that's great. I got a hold of Judy LaMarche, and at that stage of the game, the government was very involved. It was fitness and amateur sport was the ministry. And so Monroe and Judy were the two ministers that we dealt with constantly. And she said, well, I think I can find $25,000. So now we're in a position to host the first national championships. Who but RMC and Air Commodore Birchall, he was just as keen as mustard. You're bloody right we will. And so we not only hosted the first national hockey championship, we designed and produced the University Cup, which is they compete for today. And we managed to get support to buy gold rings for the winners. So it was a tremendous success. We had a huge dinner the night before the competition started, and brought in Judy was the guest speaker and so on. And then the tournament itself, everyone thought it was a foregone conclusion because Father Bauer's team from UBC, which was at least half or more of the national team that he was coaching. They thought it was, they did lead pipe cinch for them. It ends up that Ragtag McMaster beats them 1-0 for the championship. So, and that was great. We had St. Avex from the Maritimes, Alberta from the West, and so on.
We don't have a national championship played that way anymore, do we?
Yeah, they do.
Don't they do it regionally and then the regional?
No. What happens is the West declares a champion, and the Maritimes, Quebec, and Ontario. So we used to do 5, but we found it awkward. So now we do it with 4. And in order to spice the thing up a little bit, we try to see that a local team is there for publicity, but they still hold it. And at this stage of the game, you'd be pleased to know, they invited me down for a championship in Fredericton, and all the teams that were competing, I looked at their programs, and the club with the least major junior A players on the team was 40%. So what is happening now, major junior hockey is nowhere near the attraction, and so these people are taking the advantage of going to universities, getting their ticket, and then if they want to play a little pro for a year or two or whatever, there's the opportunity.
So if I understand the background correctly, you at RMC are the catalyst to get CIAU going, and then 2 of the 4 people who wrote the Constitution are from RMC.
Right.
RMC hosts the first National Hockey Championship.
Correct.
And the design of the trophy
Yeah.
on
Destaire.
Princess Street.
Yes.
John Destaire.
Destaire. I said to John, now look, take a silver bowl and you design it, and I would like to start with the first game, Queens and RMC, you know, with the funny sticks and so on. And he did a masterful job on that trophy. It needs a new base like the Stanley Cup does,
Yes.
but there it is in all its glory every year, and there's nostalgia attached to the CIAU. As it turned out, I thought this was going to be a tremendous burden taking this back into RMC. But as it turned out, it was really a godsend, because I had to deal with all the universities and with all the sports governing bodies. In the case of the professionals, CFL and NHL, I was the watchdog so that they could not raid university students for their particular teams, because the age of majority then was 21, and most of these people hadn't reached that age, and would have to get parental approval. And then the universities dug their heels in and they said, we're not going to put up with being rated. And so we went to Jake Goddard, for example, and Clarence Campbell, and said, look, this is the story. Immediately, both of them designed a committee that would deal with each incident. And this was a setback for poor old Sammy Pollock, because forget about the education.
Yes.
Anyway, it worked extremely well, and because the position provided you with the opportunity of going to all the sports governing bodies' annual meetings as an ex officio. Now, I didn't go to that many, but the ones that were critical, I did do.
Yeah.
Now, what I forgot to mention right off the bat was that when the CIA was formed and finalized, I was sent to Italy to present our credentials to the FISU, Federation Internationale Universitats Sportif, you know. And a fellow's name was Primo Nebbiolo, was the president at that time. They were delighted to have us. And then the next thing is for Canada to participate in the summer games and the winter games. And so in both cases, I was the chef de mission to shepherd these people but we did inculcate more outsiders. For example, the president of judo, Japanese fellow, and a black belt and a world champion.
Mm-hmm.
We would prevail upon him to come on a couple of occasions, one to adjudicate, another to be I made it a point to reward the varsity athletes with an awards night each year.
Right.
And I would have them submit 3 names of who they would like to be invited for this awards night. And because if you just have one, and he says no, you're in trouble. Anyway, we were most successful. I would have a guest speaker, people like Paul DeVood, people like Clarence Campbell, people like the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Smythe, Connie Smythe. And it was funny when the academic staff sort of said, Smythe, Jock, I said, hey, do you not realize this fella graduated as an engineer and it was a pilot all through World War I and took the sports group all through World War II, built the Maple Leaf Gardens, bought the Shamrocks, turned them into the Leafs, and owns more, at that time, owned more Stanley Cups than any other team. What do you mean he's not the best?
So you were able to attract top people.
That's correct.
Just because it was, well, yourself and the fact it was RMC.
RMC was a big issue. It was the big issue. And I would never, yes, for example, when I got Mr. Campbell, we were in the same division together. But I didn't have that much to do with him. He was a prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials. He was a referee in the National Hockey League. And what affiliation I did have was when we were on this committee. And the committee for the National Hockey League was Walter from Minnesota, Walter.
Gordon?
No. Sammy Pollock, myself, and Brian O'Neill, or Selke. So, you would just have meetings, sometimes not one that year, but if there was an issue where this fella now is failed out and you're denying him an opportunity. But I would investigate that with the university. Was there any hope for tutorials and salvaging this fellow? Mm-hmm. And if there wasn't, then we would say, okay, go ahead. So it was those sort of contexts that you would have. And of course, from my own point of view, this was by far the best period of service that I had in my career. We just arrived at the right time and the right place, and all of a sudden the college took on a persona that everyone wanted a piece of. And don't think for 1 minute that wasn't what am I trying to say? Andy O'Brien, with his 3 articles, did so much to inculcate RMC into certainly into the university and college environment.
Right.
So then a fellow like Lloyd Percival calls. He said, Danny, and he had his own program on at that time, and he said, I'd like to spend 3 or 4 days with you. I'm writing this book. So we accommodated him. Then we were getting calls from everywhere. For example, we had the Bonhomme de Carnival, the Quebec Carnival. They liked the idea of having the Scarlets participate in their shindig. And we were going to play, the first time we were going to play Laval. And something went wrong with the coach. I don't know whether he was trying to hold them up. I don't know. It doesn't matter. And the game was called off. So they're beside themselves. So I get a call from Punch Imlach. He said, Danny, why don't we just have a friend? I said, they can't play against, that was a semi-pro team. He said, no, we'll just to save the situation. So he said, pick up 3 or 4 players, augment the team, and we'll not take advantage of the situation. So I said, okay. So I dressed, Jimmy dressed, Hayward dressed, and Wally Travis. And we have a great game. And I took a penalty, and I'm sitting in a penalty box, and a big distinguished gentleman leans over and he said, since when are you a cadet? Dollar Sandhurst.
Yeah.
So
it was the cadets and you 4?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And so they beat us 6-1 or something. But
you scored a goal on these guys?
I did. And anyway, this led, because of the condition of the cadets and the pressure they put on their players. Punch called me and he said, Danny, as you know, I like the veteran player. But he said, the problem is, it takes them pretty near till Christmas time to get in shape. And if they have an injury, it's almost the year. So he said, any chance you could come to our training camp and help us out? Well, I said I might. Let me talk it over with the staff first. So I got a hold of Jimmy and the gang. What do you think? Yeah, hell of an idea. Let's go. So I got a hold of Punch and I said, now Punch, I'm going to come up and take you on a mile run. And if you've got anybody that can't make it in 7 minutes, he's got a problem. But I won't for 1 minute put up with any smart remarks from players to, he said, you can count on that. And as a result, we kept going back and back. But when that word got out, Pittsburgh wanted us. Then Detroit. Then Vancouver. And it reached the point where it was, you know, if the word got out we've all been fired. Yeah. On the next cadet weekend, I got the opportunity to address the group, and I said, now look, you people come from branches across Canada. Doug Hargraves is trying to set up a recruiting system, and all we want you to do is look in your local papers or wander down to competitions, and if you see a blue chip kid, just send his name. You don't have to do any more than that. Just send his name, and we'll go and make contact.
Now, this is really interesting. RMC going out and actually trying to recruit good athletes.
Yes.
Begins shortly after your arrival.
Yes.
Because I don't think it was done before that.
No.
So it was a matter of going out and seeing if you'd just talk them into coming to RMC.
Right. And the thing is, at every intake each year, there'd be 2 or 3 who this wasn't the place for them and left. And I finally got them to agree to the idea, look, let us fill 1, 2, or 3 of those billets. And of course the classic case was I was sitting in my office, or I was just coming back to my office, standing in front of it is a young fellow, and he said, "Sir, could I speak to you for a minute?" I said, "Sure. Come on in, have a seat." He said, "I want to come to RMC." I said, "Well, have you applied?" He said, "Yes," and they turned me down. I said, "I don't know what I can do for you there." Well, he said, "I want you to know, I went on and took top honors in my university course. And I went to the joint cadet course and was the #1. Oh. I said, "Well, just a moment." And there used to be a fellow by the name of Lloyd Smith, was on staff at RMC, and he was moved to Perth. And I phoned him and I said, "Listen, you gravel agitator, you owe me one. Here's a kid that is just unbelievable, and you got a choice. If you want to get even, now's your time. It's either the kid comes in or you post me out of here. Leave it with me." Word comes back, he's coming. He was on every single team in the college. He wins the Tommy Smart and the Prince of Wales. Cadet 4 bar, wins a Rhodes Scholarship.
Oh my God.
Major General John Adams. A little area that I missed along the way when we were talking about equipment, there were 4 organizations. There was CCM, Coopers, Winwells, and Bauer. And right away, Queens and RMC became their immediate attention. For example, CCM outfitted Queens and RMC with the first helmets, and we were to comment on them. And they would always send me a pair of hockey gloves. And for example, I would say, "Now look, whenever I got a hockey glove, it was god awful because it was flat. It was not tapered. And when you closed it, you put a cleat in the center and it wore out in no time flat. And it didn't breathe, so the leather was just dried up to nothing, and you only had one stitch, and in a matter of games, your finger was through this stitching. And you did not consider the area of the wrist and over the knuckles, because the fingers are covered, but the knuckles, and so we wanted a ridge all the way up to the top, which they did. And they reached the point where they sent down their, I don't know what you call them, but their key guy to look at our equipment and look at our recommendations. For example, John Carr, Chris's brother.
Yes.
Bobby Carr, I should say. He was backing, he's a defenseman, he was backing to take a guy with the hip. And the damn pad, when you do that, reaching out, comes inside the leg. And so he got the worst shot horse, had to go into the hospital and get him to break the calcium down. And I was just livid. And so I got a hold of the, I forget now which one it was, I think it was Cooper. I said, no, why can't we design this, taper the pant so that it doesn't shift, and put a pad, similar pad, along the back? Good idea. Put it in, and the first National Hockey League team to wear them was the Detroit Red Wings, and they still wear them. Group. The team that come in ended up achieving the fourth pillar at the college. Number one. Number two, the staff. You take Captain from the Air Force. He went on to become the in charge of the program at the University of Alberta.
Who, Tatterchuck?
Tatterchuck.
Yeah.
Ralph Lund, I got him into and took over the program at Queen's.
Yes.
Tatterchuck goes with the Olympic Committee as a consultant on basketball, and Rolf does the same thing with track and field. And he was the guy that expelled Johnson when Dudley Hill stayed on for some time and became the cadet or the director of the program, and he was great in rugger and badminton, and he was not only a champion himself, but he developed champions. Most of that group of other ranks became commissioned.
Yeah.
Almost all of them. One of them, a corporal, Jimmy Murray, came to me and he said, boss, they're going to run an Olympic committee and they want people to come and take the tests and take the schooling and then write a test. And he passed. He went with the Olympics and spent a whole career with the Olympics. We had a fellow by the name of Emery, who was a great two-man bobsleigh. He ended up taking I think it was a third-year cadet as his partner, and they won at the Olympics. Chief Petty Officer Pitt and his wife did more life-saving qualifications than anybody in the history of Canada. He went on to become the top director at a Brentwood College outside of Victoria.
Yes.
So the whole staff was really responsible for what happened. Any one of them could take charge of, especially when it came to intramural. I would say to them, "You're going to look after whatever it was. Is it rugger or is it lacrosse? Keep in mind what I want you to do. The cadet has got to get the team to draw the equipment. One is going to be the manager, one is going to be the coach, one is going to be the official, and I don't want you to interfere until, if you think that the cadets are not getting something out of it or it's not going well, yes. But short of that, let the cadets run it." And it was just unbelievable. For example, I can remember walking around to all these activities with Commodore Birchall, and you're just dumbfounded at the way the thing operated. And so there was...
He had a fine team.
There
Awfully gifted
was
people.
no place for an eye. It was our and us. And one thing I didn't tell you. At one stage of the game, the academic staff, I don't know whether it's because we were getting too much publicity, but they started saying to the varsity players, "You better drop that, you're not going to make your year." And this happened a number of times, and then 2 or 3 of the hockey team. So I went to Colonel Sawyer and I said, "Sir, could I have 5 minutes at your next Senate meeting?" "What for?" I said, "No, I don't want to tell you. And you can cut me off in 10 seconds, but I just would like that 5 minutes." "All right," he said. So he asked me to speak. I said, "I'd like to throw something at you as a group. I'm getting a lot of feedback from the cadets that the academic staff is discouraging them from participating in these varsity events." And I said, "I find that very tough to accept, because," I said, "we have a staff member for every 7 cadets in the college. So nobody is overworked." I said, "And I happen to have all the marks of the cadet wing." We were about 200, I think, at that time. And I said, "Strange enough, the varsity athletes are in the top 1/3 of the marks. What's your excuse for the other 2/3? There was silence. I said, "This is the only place that I know of, university, that college members aren't chairman or assistant coaches or whatever with the activities. And I think it would be very useful for you to join them on a weekend or whatever and just see what happens." I forget what happened, but Tom Hutchison jumps up and said, "I'd like to vote to be the chairman of the hockey team." I said, "You're on." And then the whole group. And from then on until I left, it was nothing but staff members, chairman of all those activities.
Amazing. Still is.
Yes.
Or certainly was in my time.
So, and take a guy that just got his honorary degree, the Liberty.
Oh yeah, Bernie.
They were failing him. I said, what the hell do you mean you're failing him? I said, I went to his boss man and I said, now look, this guy is full value in the armed forces. Surely he's worth a few tutorials to help him through. They gave him those tutorials. He ingratiated himself with the department, went on, had a hell of a degree, and
well, that's great, Danny. Thank you so very much.
we're failing him. I said, what the hell do you mean you're failing him? I said, I went to his boss man and I said, now look, this guy is full value in the armed forces. Surely he's worth a few tutorials to help him through. They gave him those tutorials. He ingratiated himself with the department, went on, had a hell of a degree, and
well, that's great, Danny. Thank you so very much.